The date is the 12th of August 1944, 6:20 p.m. in the evening. The air is full of the sound of plane engines. Nothing unusual about this, as members of the United States Army Air Force and the RAF often fly missions overhead on their almost nightly bombing raids on German cities. Across the Channel, the Western Allies are beginning to push the German forces out of Normandy. Suddenly, the sky rings out with the sound of an explosion over the quiet Suffolk village of Blythburgh. A converted B-24 Liberator taking part in a secret mission has just exploded, killing both men on board. Lieutenants Wilford John Willey and Joseph Patrick Kennedy Jr., a man who from a young age had been groomed to be the US president, and whose loss would push his younger brother Jack onto this path, and he would be the first death in a long line of tragedies that would come to be known as the Kennedy Curse. The eldest of 9 children, born in Hull, Massachusetts on the 25th of July 1915 to Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr., a businessman and investor, and Rose Elizabeth Fitzgerald Kennedy, a socialite. Politics would play a huge role in his life from an early age, whether it would be his maternal grandfather, who had been mayor of Boston and a member of the US House of Representatives, saying, "This child is the future president of our nation," or his father's own political position as the US ambassador to Britain in the 1930s. Joseph's education would help steer him in this direction, and he would graduate from Harvard College in 1938 with a degree in government, before going on to study in Harvard Law School. He would travel Europe during his studies and spend time in both Britain and Nazi Germany, but with his mind set on a political future, he would attend the Democratic National Convention of 1940. In the June of 1941, he would leave education and join the US Navy Reserves, training as a naval aviator. He would earn his wings and be commissioned as an ensign in the May of 1942. At first, he would be assigned to Patrol Squadron 203 in Norfolk, Virginia and Puerto Rico, and would remain at this posting until September 1943, when he would be transferred to Bomber Squadron 110, stationed in Britain. He would take part in submarine patrols over the 1943-44 winter, and it would be the early spring of 1944 that he would have completed his 25 combat missions and was eligible to return home. Joseph refused and instead volunteered for the newly formed Operation Aphrodite. Operation Aphrodite was created as an answer to the high losses of US bomber crews taking part in missions over Europe. Events such as Black Thursday in the October of 1943 still loom large in the memories of many a bomber crew. 291 B-17 Flying Fortresses on a raid over Bavaria would come under heavy attack from anti-aircraft fire and up to 300 Luftwaffe fighters. 60 bombers would be shot down, with 600 men killed or taken prisoner. No aircrafts in the raid were left undamaged, 17 of who were able to return to their bases were so badly damaged they had to be sent for scrap. The operation was to take B-17 and B-24 bombers, load them with explosives, remove all crew from them except a pilot and co-pilot, who were to bail out shortly after takeoff. The plane would then be radio controlled from a command aircraft following, and crashed into areas such as U-boat pens, V-1 and V-2 launch sites. It could be called a primitive version of the drone warfare we hear about today. On the 16th of May 1944, Joseph would attend the wedding of his younger sister, Kathleen Kennedy, to William Cavendish. He would be the only other member of the Kennedy family who attended. It would be a short and sadly tragic marriage. William would be killed by a sniper in the September of that year while fighting in Belgium, and Kathleen herself would die in her own plane crash in 1948. Joseph and his co-pilot were the first US Navy personnel to take part in one of these missions, the 7th mission of Operation Aphrodite, with the target an underground military complex in France. Originally, Ensign James Simpson, who had been Kennedy's regular co-pilot, was meant to accompany him on this mission, but Lieutenant Wilford John Willey had pulled rank and taken his place. At 6 o'clock on the 12th of August 1944, they took off from RAF Firstfield, carrying a payload of 20,000 pounds of explosives on board. After a short flight time, the following command aircraft, who would take over the piloting of the B-24 when it was fully radio controlled, completed its first remote control turn. The plane headed south for the 2 pilots to bail out near RAF Maidstone, and the safety pin was removed from the explosives. Kennedy would radio through the code word "Spade Flush." These would be his last known final words. 2 minutes later, the explosives on board detonated prematurely. Kennedy and Willie were both killed instantly, with a Lieutenant McCarthy, who was on board the command aircraft, being wounded. The wreckage would destroy hundreds of trees and damage up to 147 buildings on the ground in Blytheburg, causing several small fires, but thankfully no one on the ground was hurt. Both Kennedy and Willie would be posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, the Air Medal, and the Purple Heart. Kennedy's citation for his Navy Cross would read, "For extraordinary heroism and courage in an aerial flight as a pilot of a United States Liberator bomber on August 12, 1944, well knowing the extreme dangers involved and totally unconcerned for his own safety, Kennedy unhesitatingly volunteered to conduct an extremely hazardous and special operational mission. Intrepid and daring in his tactics and unwavering confidence in the vital importance of his task, he willingly risked his life in this extreme measure of service, and by his great personal valour and fortitude in carrying out a perilous undertaking, sustained and enhanced the finest traditions of the United States Naval Service." No one really knows what caused the explosives to detonate when they did, but theories have ranged from crew error, faulty wiring, and even stray radio signals. But Operation Aphrodite would be a disaster, with only one plane ever hitting its target, and will be called off by General Carl Spaatz in January 1945. The Kennedys' ambition to have a president in the family would pass to their second oldest son, John, who had also served in the US Navy during the Second World War and had been wounded in the Pacific Theater. He would become the 35th President of America in 1961. The Kennedy family chose to honor Joseph's memory by setting up the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation to improve the lives of people with intellectual disabilities. His name would also carry on in the family, with his grandnephew, Joseph Patrick Kennedy III, currently serving in the US House of Representatives. The US Navy would name a destroyer after him, which was launched in 1946. A ship that would coincidentally be involved with two of his younger brothers, with Robert Kennedy serving on board for a short time, and it would be one of the ships sent to Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 by JFK. This ship still survives and now serves as a museum in Battleship Cove, Fall River, Massachusetts. A witness of the explosion, speaking years later, said, "Our attention was drawn because it was quite a large formation and included a number of different aircraft. All of a sudden, there was a tremendous explosion, and the Liberator aircraft was blown apart, with pieces falling in all directions all over New Delight Wood at Blytheburg." Neither Kennedy or Willie's bodies were ever found after the explosion. Their names are inscribed among the missing in the Cambridge American War Cemetery, and Kennedy has a marker for himself in Arlington National Cemetery, Virginia. Local rumor has it that during a visit to Britain, John F. Kennedy visited the area to pay respects to his older brother. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. This was Joseph Kennedy's final flight, and this was a little bit of history.